So now we have come to the chapter on patience, the 6th chapter. So this is one of the most important chapters of this text. So usually when I give with regard to cultivation of bodhicitta, I usually say that these two chapters, the 6th and the 8th chapters of the Bodhisattva Avatar are most important, two most important chapters for that. Whatever wholesome deeds, such as venerating the Buddhas and generosity, that had been amassed over 1,000 years, will all be destroyed in one moment of anger. So whatever practice you do, first of all, you should have interest in it. In order for that, you should know the benefit, the advantage of that practice. Otherwise, it would just, you won't you would take it like an easy way. So in order to practice patience, you should know the benefit of patience and the disadvantage or fault of what happens if you let yourself be carried away by anger, which is the opposite of patience. And therefore, first here, what is taught is the faults of anger. So in this text, there is mention of over 1,000 eons. So the practice of venerating Buddhas and generosity amassed over 1,000 eons would be destroyed by a moment of anger. But in Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara, it mentions 100 eons. That merit or virtues accumulated over 100 eons would be, it is mentioned that would be destroyed by a moment of anger. So what is said is that if Bodhisattva on a higher level of ground becomes angry at a Bodhisattva of a lower level, then that would have a very small effect on destroying the merits that they have collected. Whereas for an ordinary people like us, common people like us, if we become angry at bodhisattvas who are on a higher level, then that has more powerful, that is more grave in destroying the merit. So the terms such as or etc. Includes the practices of morality. So practice of venerating Buddhas and generosity and morality will be destroyed. The merits gained from them over 1,000 eons will be destroyed by a moment of anger. But the virtues which have been collected with the help of wisdom realizing emptiness cannot be destroyed by such an anger. So becoming angry at bodhisattvas, what happens is merit collected through merit, morality and generosity for over 100 eons will be destroyed. It's said in Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara. Verse number 2, there is no transgression like hatred, there is no fortitude like patience, thus I should strive in various ways to meditate on patience. So of course other afflictions will also harm, destroy our their respective effects. But with regards to anger, it not only destroys the merit, but it also gives not only gives rise to its own effect, but it destroys other merits that we have collected. So the antidote to anger is, which counteracts anger, is patience. So of course other practices indirectly can help overcome the delusions. Anger happens because of ignorance. Ayadeva says, just as the physical faculty pervades the whole of the body, likewise ignorance permeates all delusions. So with regard to the faculties, the faculty of ear or hearing does not pervade or cover the faculty of seeing. And similarly, the other faculties of taste and so forth does not cover the others faculties. But then with regard to physical faculty, it covers all faculties. So likewise, ignorance covers all or permeates all the different kinds of afflictions, delusions. That's what Ayadeva says. In Chandrakirti's clear words, it also mentions the same. The antidote which go against certain negativity, certain delusions will not be antidote to ignorance, but the antidote to ignorance is an antidote to all the different kinds of delusions. Thus, I should strive in various ways to meditate on patience. In various ways here refers to all kinds of practices, including patience. You should practice them by thinking of by reasoning out, and then seeing the benefit or advantage of practicing them. And then you should develop aspiration or interest in developing them. It's not just enough to say such and such one Lama says so, or the Buddha has said so. But even if the Buddha may have taught such things, or Lama may have taught something, you should also use your reasoning to come to the conclusion. And so this is the way of the greater vehicle, and especially the Nalanda tradition. So I usually say this. The master, in the elucidation of the meaning of Abhisamaya Lamkara, which is written by Haribhadra, he goes through the paying homages to different masters like Asanga and Vasubandhu. So then he goes on to pay homage to after Asanga, he pays homage to Vasubandhu, and then after that he pays homage to Vimuktisena, who was a teacher, who was a student of Master Vasubandhu, who had 4 disciples who were more expert in the different subjects, such as Sthiramati being the more excelling in Abhidharma than his teacher. So Haribhadra says that the commentary on Abhisamaya Lamkara by Vasubandhu was seen as not being a right or correct commentary interpretation by Vimuktisena, who was a student of Vasubandhu, and accordingly Vimuktisena explained Abhisamaya Lamkara within the from the point of view of Madhyamaka, middle way. So although Vimuktisena, of course, was a student of Vasubandhu, when he examined how Vasubandhu, his master, had commented on Abhisamaya Alamkara, he found it to be a wrong interpretation, and then this is what the Haribhadra, in his homage to Vimuktisena, says. This is what I find wondrous. So this is how the Indian scholars go by, through reasoning and then coming to conclusions. So with regard to reason and logic, of course, we say that inferential cognitions finally get back to the direct perception. So inferential perceptions or cognition rely on some reason. And then there are certain other perceptions which are called direct perception, which see things barely, nakedly, whereas inferential cognition, for inferential cognition, it actually realizes or sees is something which is slightly obscured for us, which must be come to conclusion through reasoning. And then within the reasoning, there is a reasoning by which you come to a conclusion saying that such and such things cannot be true, because if it were so, then it should be accessible to us. So in this way, you go through, use reasoning and logic to come to a conclusion about certain things which are obscure to us for now, or hidden phenomena as they're called. So ultimately, of course, after having come to the conclusion through inferential cognition, then one actually has to use one's experience to corroborate the reality that is found by this inference. So this is how the approach of Buddhism is like science. So you don't just believe right away, but you actually examine things and then come to conclusion and infer through reasoning certain things. And then finally you draw the conclusion from your experience. So for the last 30 years, more than 30 years, I've been discussing with scientists. So if regarding certain thing, you have to find what the reasoning is. If you accept something, if there are any logical fallacies to it, if you don't find any logical fallacies, then you should accept, otherwise not. So strive in various ways shows as means that you have to use lots of reasonings. So what is the disadvantage or fault of anger or hatred? And then when you find the reasonings true, then you conclude that it's really bad. Otherwise, you are not like following this kind of practice of patience foolishly without any reason. My mind will not experience peace if it fosters painful thoughts of hatred. I shall find no joy or happiness. Unable to sleep, I shall feel unsettled. So this is something we all know. If we are very angry, we lose sleep. Then you would just roll in your bed here and there. And then you would, if you are alcoholic, then you will take to alcoholism, and not just once, twice, and so on. The moment anger arises in us, we lose peace of mind. So while you are relaxed, if somebody brings you bad news, then you become angry, and this peaceful state of mind is lost immediately. So this is what is shown by the first two lines in the first two lines of the verse number 3. So then you are not, whatever your food will not taste good. And then when somebody, a friend or somebody near to you comes to meet you, you will actually expel the person. So joy here refers to a mental state, and then happiness refers to the physical. So scientists say that if you are angry all the time, then it actually eats into your immune system. So, which means that anger actually harms your health. So without anger, but when you have peace of mind, then even the immune system is strengthened. So peace of mind is not merely about absence of problems, difficulties, but when you actually face difficulties, when you are able to face it. So sometimes when people have lots of, here you are not actually trying to avoid or ignore the problems, but actually trying to come face to face with it. So sometimes when people have problems, they go on picnic or they go on vacation. It's like ignoring or just trying to forget the problem. When you are in a problem, when you have a problem, you have to check whether you can actually overcome it or not. Then, if it's something that you can overcome, you don't need to actually avoid it. But if it's something which cannot be overcome, then you should not lose your heart as well, as it will come later. So, depending on your way of thinking, you're responding to these problems, and you will not lose your peace of mind. So unable to sleep, I should feel unsettled. When you are angry, you become restless. By it, friends and relatives are disheartened. Though drawn by my generosity, they will not trust me. So even if someone were to have helped you, were kind to you, and when you are angry, when you actually don't become friendly with them. In brief, there is nobody who lives happily with anger. So with regard, even doctors don't say that be angry all the time and then you will be healthy. They tell you to relax, take rest. So relaxation here doesn't mean physically just lying on a bed or relaxing on a very comfortable bed. Even if you may be lying on a very comfortable bed, if your mind is always restless, then you are not actually relaxing. So relaxation, real relaxation, is having a very peaceful mind. Hence, the enemy anger creates suffering such as these. But whoever assiduously overcomes it finds happiness now and hereafter. Verse number 6 finished. And so, it shows that anger has no benefit whatsoever. So when do you become angry? When you have some problem. So on the immediate level, it might seem that anger is actually helping you and give you more courage. Somebody who may be very humble usually, when he or she becomes angry, then they become very bold. So that shows that anger teaches them courage. but as a blind, foolish courage. If you of course develop some kind of a courage through reasoning, then maybe that's okay. But the boldness that comes through anger is very foolish one. So usually Holiness says this.
Blind energy. So not really
So 콘드 단이 베게나 송사부터 콘드 뭐란들 직심을 로고로 깨줘야 그 리버지 되게 소치레스 이네 디베다 쿠페 스네다 로고시스 인디 sambarati susu ko miyu matuki shetu maris. So when you are angry, you will lose this ability to make judgment about good and bad things. So when anger arises, apparently it seems to give us courage, but then it causes more problems to us ultimately. So rather than becoming angry, if somebody harms you, don't lose temper, but be calm, and then look at the person and try to check the person well, investigate where the weak spot of a person. Then you can, if you find the weak spot of that person, the weakness, and then try to hit there, you will be able to deal with the person effectively. 매준 땅에 레라사치 가와네 도스 제스는 거 제니 아니 셈 콘로사베가 룽만나 체 셈시들네 거는 미디 수부 가와네 쉬나 아니 베디 약설에서 도스 제니 아니 주위는 딱바 디고 중거레스 콘로사치는 베데 셈 베치나 콘루 상황도 송바이나 아니 나란주 랭예주에게 ngoyne su 통토에 그 랭예주에 남주디 베주당 토요가 요마리스 아니 ngoyne 수 통투 걸 말레스 디 잡발로 콩주 시원 손내 가르쳐 봐 있나요? 그 뒤에 아니 그거 주에 맹에 ngoyne 수도 마찬바 차도 그랬어. So if you think about the world on a national, international level, the policies of the nations down to the families where we plan to cause harm to others are done by anger. But whosoever assiduously overcomes it finds happiness now and hereafter. If you refrain from or restrain your anger, then you will not be in the midst of problems and difficulties. And then, with regards to resolving anger, Buddhism teaches causality, cause and effect. Anger is the effect. Now, it doesn't help to pray that may anger go away, but you have to find the cause and conditions which bring about or causes you to become angry. And when you reduce those, minimize those causes, then you will be able to eliminate or overcome anger. Having found its fuel of mental unhappiness in the prevention of what I wish for and in doing what I do not want, hatred increases and then destroys me. So, anger is brought about by unhappiness, mental unhappiness. So mental unhappiness here means When something is wrong is done to yourself and to your people on your side, your near and dear ones, and also when you see people who actually obstruct you and your friends from succeeding in your plans or projects, then you become unhappy. So this becomes like the food for anger. And then it actually nourishes anger and nurtures anger, and then you engage in all kinds of actions, physical. Therefore, I should totally eradicate the fuel of this enemy. So the enemy is anger, and the fuel, the unhappiness has to be eradicated. For this enemy has no other function than that of causing me harm. So Kundalama Lama Rinpoche has said that our enemies, human enemies, always try to harm us, but they also have other works to take care of their own family and their relatives. But anger, the job of anger is only to disturb our peace of mind, and it has no other function. This is what Kundalama Lama Rinpoche has said. So for this enemy has no other function than that of causing me harm. Whatever befalls me, I shall not disturb my mental joy. So the cause which actually increases your anger, whatever may befall you, you should prevent yourself from being trapped by this. For having me been made unhappy, I shall not accomplish what I wish, and my virtue will decline. As Madhyamaka Avatara says, if you dissent, if you hold or develop resentment towards those who harm you, what benefit it has. So, in other words, if you become angry, whatever harm has been done to you, that cannot be undone. So when you actually harbor anger towards those who harm you, who have harmed you, I mean, there's nothing you can do about that harm which has already been done. You cannot undo it. So because somebody has harmed you, you become angry. But if you harbor resentment, what it does is, if you you cannot do anything about the harm that has been done, but you cause yourself more harm through anger. So, for having been made unhappy, I shall not accomplish what I wish, and my virtues are declined. So, why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied? And what is the use of being unhappy about something if it cannot be remedied? So this is a very realistic approach. Verse number 10. So when you are in a problem, you should always check whether it can be resolved or not. If it can be resolved, then you should not be unhappy about the problem, but try to find the means to resolve it, to overcome it. Whereas if the problem cannot be overcome at all, then there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot be out of it, this problem. So there's no use in becoming angry and worried about it. So as Buddhist practitioners, we can think about our own karma, which has brought about such problems and difficulties, and then think about the problems of samsara, which is the nature of samsara. So we have all kinds of suffering, not meeting with what we want, meeting with what we don't want. And so think about the nature of karma, the thinking that it's my karma, that I am suffering this. So otherwise, if you become angry, without thinking about, if you have a problem without thinking about karma, and but what happens is you tend to point at others for causing those troubles and problems to you. But when you think about karma, it's actually what you think is that this problem has happened to me because of my own wrongdoings, and then it actually helps to reduce anger. Of course, when we talk about karma, some people say that Tibetans have this habit saying, "Oh, it's my karma, I can't do anything," and blaming everything on karma and not doing anything. That's also like complacency. So, of course, we may have created bad karmas in the past, but if we are able to, in this life, if we are able to create powerful positive karmas, then those negative karmas can be overcome with the help of those positive ones. So if you have created bad negative karma in the past through anger or hatred in the past, then this can be purified, overcome through the force of the merit that you accumulate through meditation or cultivation of bodhicitta. So just blaming everything on karma is not doing nothing. It's not really good. It's silly. So what we are talking about is we have created karma, and therefore we also reap the result of that karma. And therefore, if we put effort, we also can create karmas which will bring about good experiences as a consequence. So sometimes the teaching on karma seems to make us more complacent. The cause of happiness for myself, verse number 11, for myself and for my friends, I want no suffering, no disrespect, no harsh words, and nothing unpleasant. But from my enemies, it is the opposite. So this is how we usually deal with others. So we are unhappy when our friends or oneself have suffering. When you and your friends or relatives have suffering, you don't like it. So when somebody talks harshly or about you or your family or relatives and so forth, then you also become unhappy. So this is talking about the 8 worldly concerns. And the opposite is true for in relation to our adversaries. So when yourself and your family or relatives are suffering, then we don't like it. And then we blame others for causing these problems. So it's very clear that if some person becomes blind or foolish when he or she is overcome with anger. In the past, in Lhasa, in Novalenka, there were 2 mechanics or drivers who came from Kalimpong, And one day he was actually repairing one of the cars in Novolenka, and he was bold. And while he was repairing the car, he actually accidentally hit on the car. And then it was painful for him. But then he became so angry that he actually had butt on the car again and again. So this is foolish, isn't it? So he already had pain by hitting on the car accidentally while repairing it. But then, because of anger, he just hit the car again and again with his head. So that's more pain. So there's no reason, no use. So we all have the experience, of course, that when you are angry, you may talk very harshly to your friends and relatives, but then when the anger has subsided, you feel rather ashamed of having talked so harshly to them. You feel embarrassed. So when you are angry, you are not able to make the right judgment, and then you use such harsh language. So when your enemy or adversary has some good things happening to them, are happy, then you become unhappy. And so in this way, we indulge in the eight worldly concerns. The causes of happiness sometimes occur, but the causes of suffering are frequent. So long as we are under the power of, under the sway of karma and delusions, we are bound to experience suffering. The causes of happiness, if you look for them to come from outside, like the material objects or your wealth, then these in turn are like the changeables, the happiness or the pleasant experience you draw from them are rather changeable suffering. If you have a car, you're very happy, but after a month or 6 months, you might find it not so attractive and you want to buy another new car. Doesn't it happen to you? So in the beginning you buy a new car and you're very excited about it, but then after a while it makes you feel annoyed when you see it, or so the lots of pleasant experiences that we usually seek are changeable suffering. So if you try to enjoy those sources of suffering, sources of pleasure more and more, then it creates unhappiness within us. And then what this gives rise to is unhappiness and suffering. And so if you are not able to face these problems by thinking properly, then there is no end to suffering. Now you have to think a positive quality of suffering. You'll be able to use it. Without suffering, there is no renunciation. So because you have suffering, it gives you some kind of courage or aspiration to go out of it. So even the Buddha himself taught about suffering right in the beginning of his teaching on the Four Noble Truths. So when you are aware of suffering, then you will try to find, when you become aware of suffering, what it is, then you will actually look into its causes. Without knowing what causes you some disease or sickness, you will not seek medication. And then, in order to overcome or that sickness, you have to take the medicine, and then through that, with the help of the medicine, you will be overcome the sickness. So, thinking about suffering has its benefit to inspire us to cultivate renunciation. Therefore, mind, you should stand firm. If some ascetics and people of Karnapa endure the pain of cuts and burns for no reason than for the sake of liberation, why have I no courage? So people actually work so hard, go through all kinds of hardships for a very small result. For example, the Olympians, the sports men and women, and work so hard. And then what they get in the end is a medal, and then fame and gold they gain. They are awarded gold medals and then fame. And then while they are young, people they're happy because people also take their autographs and so forth. But when they become old, then they live very unhappily. So for a very small purpose end, people put so much effort. So of course, when we put effort in transforming our mind, there is lots of hardship that you have to face, but the end result is something huge. And therefore, it's worth putting effort. So, of course, we have to put effort, but if you ask whether it's possible to make transformation in our mind, it is possible, because Shantideva says, through familiarization, there's nothing which becomes not easy. So when I was in my 30s, I gave thought to or reflected on emptiness, the view of emptiness. Even while I was in Tibet, I have done so. So when I found that there's possibility of overcoming all delusions. Once you realize emptiness, there is a possibility of being able to overcome all delusions. And then I was also thinking in those days that if I could reach nirvana, then I would take a very long rest. And in those days, I was quite, of course, amazed about bodhicitta, and I felt I had appreciation of bodhicitta, but it's very difficult, I was thinking, to have the experience. But then, over the years, by familiarizing my mind with the bodhicitta, for the last 40 years or so, then that thought that it's difficult was gone after about 20 years of familiarizing my mind with bodhicitta. So I could feel that if I could put effort, perhaps I can have the real experience of bodhicitta. But what I'm lacking is the time for cultivating single-pointed concentration. Otherwise, I think that if I had the time to meditate, I could reach the part of accumulation and part of preparation. So this is not this change has not come about because I'm the Dalai Lama and sitting on a high throne, but it's because of my familiarization of my mind with these principles. So there's nothing whatsoever that is not made easier through acquaintance. So through becoming acquainted with small harms, I should learn to patiently accept greater harms. Who has not seen this to be so, with trifling suffering, such as the bites of snakes and insects, feelings of hunger and thirst, and with such minor things as rashes? I should not be impatient with heat and cold, wind and rain, sickness, bondage and beatings, for if I am, the harm they cause me will increase. So when you have very small kind of troubles or suffering, you should not be impatient. You should not be some, when they see their own blood, become especially brave and steady, but some, when they see the blood of others, faint and fall unconscious. So in the world, when people are very brave and they have to go in battles, while in the midst of the fighting, when they see their own limbs are being cut or themselves bleeding, their courage to fight increases. These reactions come from the mind being either steady or timid. Therefore, I should disregard harms caused to me and not be affected by suffering. So if you see that suffering is something that you can actually overcome and that you can become free from it, there's ways, that means to overcome it, the sufferings, then you should actually engage in the practices. If there is no way that we can overcome suffering, the Buddha would not have the reason to teach us about suffering. Because there is possibility to overcome suffering, therefore the Buddha also taught us that there is suffering. Because suffering is something which is temporary, which comes through causes and conditions, and therefore it can be changed. And therefore, suffering is something that we can completely get rid of from ourselves, and thereby reaching the ultimate happiness. And then, while trying to cultivate or gain that ultimate happiness, which is freedom from suffering, why not suffer something which is minor? So as I said this morning, to uproot suffering by going progressing along the path referred by the mantra of Heart Sutra, so you see that highest goal that you actually aspire to reach, and while trying to reach there, you along the path, when you face problems, and those are small problems, and you should try to always fight and combat them. So of course, when you combat against the negative emotions, you will have lots of difficulties, but you should not feel discouraged by them. Even when the wise are suffering, their minds remain very lucid and undefiled, for when war is being waged against deceptive conceptions, much harm is caused at the time of battle. So suffering is something that is unwanted by us, and if you don't want suffering, then what you have to do is try to overcome or combat against the causes of suffering, which are delusions and karma. The victorious warriors are those who, having disregard all suffering, vanquish the foes of hatred and so forth. Common warriors slay only corpse. Furthermore, suffering has good qualities. Through being disheartened with it, arrogance is dispelled. So these are showing the qualities of suffering, more qualities of suffering. You will, when you think about suffering of the lower realms and the samsara as a whole, you will be able to aspire to generate or renunciation, or this will to be free from suffering. Compassion arises for those in cyclic existence. Negativity is shunned and joy is found in virtue. As I do not become angry with great sources of suffering such as jaundice, then why be angry with inanimate creatures? They too are provoked by conditions. Although they are not wished for, these sicknesses arise. And likewise, although they are not wished for, these disturbing conceptions forcibly arise. So suffering arises from their own cause and conditions, mainly the afflictive emotions, which finally get back to the clinging at true existence of things. So suffering comes through causes and conditions. So the causes of suffering are disturbing conceptions. They arise through causes and conditions until you are able to develop the path which actually counteracts it. Without thinking, I shall be angry. People become angry with no resistance, and without thinking, I shall produce myself. Likewise, anger itself is produced. All mistakes that occur and all the various kinds of wrongdoings arise through the force of conditions. They do not govern themselves. These conditions that assemble together have no intention to produce anything, and neither does their product have the intention to produce. So these different conditions that give rise to anger and so forth do not have the intention to produce them. So as new conditions are met, things arise. New things arise. So in theistic religions, it's said that it's not merely conditions that bring about things, but there is a creator God. On the other hand, one of the non-theistic Sankhya school says that the things arise because of some primal factor, the primal substance, which is permanent. And from that primal factor, all the evolutes arise. So the next verse rejects that primal factor or substance, that which is asserted as primal substance and that which is imputed as a self, since they are unproduced, do not arise after having purposefully thought, I shall arise in order to cause harm. So these causes, the self here refers to something which has three attributes, being permanent, single, and autonomous. So that's the self which is referred by this in second line. So if you ask the question that all these things, different things in the world are created by the self or primal force, if they are not unproduced and non-existent, the primal substance and the self, then whatever wish they have to produce, harm will also not exist. So if the result is in such a nature that it goes through changes, its cause must also have the same nature of change. Otherwise, the effect cannot change if the cause is unchanging. So if things were to arise without cause, then like for example, if you look at trees or flowers, they arise from their seeds, and You can trace the seed back to a previous tree from which the seed has come, and then that tree in turn has come from its own seed, which in turn it goes back to an original seed. And so you have the seed and then meeting with other conditions giving rise to their effects, and therefore you see the changes going on in these different things. So things cannot arise from permanent cause, nor can they be come about causelessly, but they must come from causes. Since the self would permanently apprehend its object, it would follow that it would never cease to do so. Furthermore, if the self were permanent, it would clearly be devoid of action like space. So even if it met with other conditions, how could its unchanging nature be affected? So because permanent the phenomena cannot change, even if when acted upon, it remains by other conditions, it remains as before, then what could actions do to it? So in summary, it says in verse number 31, hence everything is governed by other factors, which in turn are governed by others, and in this way nothing governs itself. So when you see something, you should not look at it from one angle alone, but we have to see from all angles. So when you become angry at some person, when somebody causes harm to you, like an adversary, does something to harm you, you have to look at that person from all angles. Otherwise, you become angry. Right now, the adversary may be causing you harm, although the person may be causing you harm, but in the conditions, you are also included in that. And therefore, you will not allow. So there's an American psychiatrist, Sir Aaron Beck. When I met him, he was already in his 80s, 84. So when he told me that when we become angry, the person at whom we are angry looks negative 100%, but 90% of that is our own projection. 90% negative. That's exactly the knowledge of the Gajokubju Tambati Mazusem Namdo Patash Resedi, Loveludu Sumba, Tagaran Sunyoris, the Chibuchicanis, Jimmy Jagon Patayat. Ganij Treve Gabla, Kadune. Wider perspective. Choyoni Tayat Kitchen Buddhist, Ganij Treve Gabla. Dimension, you can't see reality. You must look from various dimensions. The University of Toyala, Chochik, Wineta, Tong Mares. Where she took said the leg when Choyoni Tayat Kitchen Buddhist, and the University of Tongares. So therefore, using our intelligence, if we look at the situation from a wider perspective, then you will see the reality. And therefore, the teaching on the truth about teaching on dependent origination actually shines forth. So when you think about the causes and conditions, this is brought about by this, and that in turn was brought about with that, and so forth. If you will not find any single target, absolute target for anger. Then you will see things very broadly. You have a very broad-mindedness. And similarly, this understanding of dependent origination can be applied to environmental crisis. So usually I say that the view of dependence is taught in Buddhism. It comes from Buddhism, but then if we could use it in all kinds of fields in the world, then you will have, will be able to have a very holistic view of things. Since everything is governed by other factors, which in turn are governed by others, so forth. Having understood this, I should not become angry with the phenomena which are like apparitions. If everything is unreal, like an apparition, then who is there to restrain what anger? Surely, in this case, restraint would be inappropriate. So when you look at this like an apparition or a magical illusion, then the question is, what is the need to overcome the negative emotions, the negative experiences? Because it's illusion. You might ask this. In the Madhyamaka Avatara, so within in the Madhyamaka Avatara, there is this mention of false convention and correct convention from the perspective of individuals, which is very significant. So it is said that the fire does not have any intrinsic existence, true existence, but in the hand that can burn if you put it in fire is also does not have any inherent existence or independent existence. But if you put, although the fire and the hands are individually devoid of any independent existence, but if you put your hand in fire, it will burn your hand. So it will not be appropriate, because conventionally I must maintain that in dependence upon restraining anger, the stream of suffering is severed. So you have to overcome the grasping at true existence. So when one sees an enemy or even a friend committing an improper action by thinking that such things arise from conditions, I shall remain in a happy frame of mind. If things were brought into being by choice, then since no one wishes to suffer, suffering would not occur to anybody, any embodied creature. So if those who harm us do so out of their own choice, of course nobody wants suffering. Suffering would not occur to any embodied creature. Through not being careful, people even harm themselves with thorns and other things, and for the sake of obtaining women and the like, they become obsessed and deprive themselves of food. And there are some who injure themselves through the unmeritorious deeds of hanging themselves, leaping from cliff, eating poison and unhealthy food. So when people are overpowered by anger and hate, attachment, then these things happen. If, when under the influence of disturbing emotions, people will even kill their treasured selves, how can they be expected not to cause harm to the bodies of other living beings? So, of being overcome by anger, if people even go to the length of killing themselves, committing suicide, and why wouldn't they not harm others? So instead of becoming angry, we should feel compassionate towards those who cause us harm. Even if I cannot develop compassion for all such people who, through the arisal of disturbing emotions, set out to try and kill me and so forth, the last thing I should do is to become angry with them. So even if it was the nature of childish to cause harm to others, so harming others, is it the nature of the childish, or is it because of some temporary cause and conditions that they are doing so? It would still be incorrect to be angry with them, for this would be like begrudging fire for having the nature of to burn. And even if the fault were temporary in that they who are by nature reliable, it would still be incorrect to be angry, for this would be like begrudging space for allowing smoke to arise in it. So this is talking about people who are moral. So here what is being checked is whether things happen through the conditions, temporary conditions. But if it were the nature of sentient beings to harm others, then this cannot be changed. If I become angry with the wielder, although I'm actually harmed by the stick, then since the perpetrator too is secondary, being in turn incited by hatred, I should be angry with the hatred instead. So now here, what is being checked is who actually harms you directly and indirectly. So if somebody hits you with a stick, you have pain, and that pain is caused directly by the stick. So you have to become angry with the stick if you were to become angry with anything. But if you were to become angry with the indirect cause, then it's the perpetrator. You should be angry at the hatred instead of becoming at the perpetrator. And so we don't become angry with the stick nor the hatred in that person, but become angry with the person. Previously, I must have caused similar harm to other sentient beings. Therefore, it is right for this harm to be returned to me who caused injury to others. Another reason for showing patience is the fact that the person is harming you is because of one's own karma as well. So because of my karma, I have the condition to meet with that person, the perpetrator. So you should not become angry at the perpetrator alone. Both the weapon and my body are the causes of my suffering. Since the other gave rise to the weapon and I to the body, with whom should I be angry? So the weapon that is used to harm me and my body also are causes of suffering. So because of these two conditions meeting, then I have a suffering. So there is nothing that I can do about it. So whom should I be angry at? If in blind attachment I cling to the suffering abscess of a human form, which cannot bear to be touched, with whom should I be angry with it when it is hurt? If you are hurt, if you have some bruise, you cannot be touched. because when people touch it, you become it becomes painful for you. So you should not be angry with the other person as well. It is the fault of the childish that they are hurt. For although they do not wish to suffer, they are greatly attached to its causes. So why should they be angry with others? As we talked about the 8 worldly concerns earlier, for a very small purpose we become angry or happy. If that is the case, then because of that we become unhappy, and then that gives rise to anger. They are greatly attached to its causes, the suffering, causes of suffering. So why should they be angry with others? Just like the guardians of the hell worlds and the forest of razor-sharp leaves, so is that suffering produced by my actions. With whom, therefore, should I be angry? On the one hand, the fact that the person who is the perpetrator is causing suffering to you is because of one's own karma. On the other hand, because the person is harming you, actually they are causing, creating karma, for negative karma, by which they will suffer in the future, like being born in hell realm. And so if you think carefully from another angle, the fact that that person has created a karma that will throw them in the hell realm is because of you. Surely isn't it I who am destroying them, says. In depending upon them, I purify my many transgressions, by patiently accepting the harms that they cause. But in depending upon me, they will fall into hellish pain for a very long time. So because of me, the perpetrator became angry at me. So when they, out of anger, when they harm you, then instead of becoming angry, if you show patience, that person becomes an object for your practice of patience, cultivation of patience, and therefore that person becomes a teacher for your patience. So by depending upon me, they will fall into hellish pain for a very long time. So since I am causing harm to them and they are benefiting me, why, unruly minds, do you become angry in such a mistaken manner? So from when you think from this point of view, actually the perpetrator is actually helping you. Whereas you are becoming a cause for the other person, the perpetrator, to have more suffering in the future. If my mind has the noble quality of patience, I shall not go to hell. If you have patience, you will not have create negative karma. Although I'm protecting myself in this way, how will it be so for them? Of course, you protect yourself. So by practicing patience, you benefit yourself and not others. Nevertheless, should I return the harm, it will not protect them either. By doing so, my conduct will deteriorate, and hence this fortitude will be destroyed. So without showing patience but becoming angry, then you will not be able to protect your own merit, virtuous practices. You are not protecting the others as well as yourself. And then, so when someone harms you, up to this verse, it shows how to accept the suffering that is caused by others, or showing patience of accepting. And then the next lines show how to show or apply antidote so as that to protect yourself from becoming angry. Since my mind is not physical, in no way can anyone destroy it, but through its being greatly attached to my body, it is caused harm by physical suffering. Since this respect, harsh speech and unpleasant words do not cause any harm to my body, why, mind, do you become angry? So when people actually disrespectfully talks to you or despises you, uses harsh language and spreads defamation, then they don't actually harm your body directly. So why, mind, do you become angry? So when people actually criticize you, when others despise you, then many other people will be unhappy with you, will also dislike you. So when such thing happens, because others will dislike me, but since it will not devour me, either in this or in another life, why do I not want this dislike? So when others dislike you, it doesn't actually cause you to create negative karma. Because it will hinder my worldly gain, even if I do not want this. So because of defamation, then it will actually obstruct you from gaining offerings and gifts. Even if I do not want this, I shall have to leave my worldly gains behind, and my wrongdoing alone will remain unmoved. So the gains that you have in this life, the gifts, will only help in this life, but in relation to them, if you become angry, then that anger will create karma, by which you suffer from lifetime to lifetime. And my wrongdoing alone will remain unremoved. Thus, it is better that I die today than live a long but wicked life. So if you live a life creating all kinds of negative actions, then that leaves an imprint on your mind. So indulging in a wrong living, for even if people like me should live a long life, there will always be suffering of death. Suppose someone should awaken from a dream in which they experience 100 years of happiness, and suppose another should awaken from a dream in which they experience just one moment of happiness. For both of these people who have awoken, that happiness will never return. Similarly, whether my life has been long or short, at the time of death, it will be finished like this. So whether you live a long or a short life, you finally die. And whatever you gain in this life, your wealth and property, and you will have to leave them behind, and nothing can be taken with you. Although I may live happily for a long time through obtaining a great deal of material wealth, I shall go forth empty-headed and destitute, just like having been robbed by a thief. Surely material wealth will enable me to live, and then I shall be able to consume transgression and do good. But if I am angry on account of it, will not my merit be consumed and transgression increase? And what use will be the life of one who only commits wrongdoing, if, for the sake of material gain, one causes the merit needed for life to generate? Surely I should be angry with those who say unpleasant things that weaken others' beings' confidence in me. In the same way, why am I not angry with people who say unpleasant things about others? If I can patiently accept this lack of confidence because it is related to someone else, then why am I not patient with unpleasant words about myself, since they are unrelated to the arising of disturbing conceptions? Should others talk badly of or even destroy holy images, reliquaries, and sacred dharma, it is improper for me to resent it, for the Buddhas can never be injured. I should prevent anger arising towards those who injure my spiritual masters, relatives, and friends. Instead, I should see, as in the manner shown before, that such things arise from conditions. Furthermore, you analyze the nature or the identity of the perpetrator, and since embodied creatures are injured by both animate beings and inanimate objects, why only bear malice to the inanimate? No, to the animate, it follows that I should patiently accept all harm. Should one person ignorantly do wrong and another ignorantly become angry with the wrongdoer, who would be at fault and who would be without fault? Why did I previously commit those actions because of which others now cause me harm? Since everything is related to my actions, why should I bear malice towards these enemies? Verse number 71 also. Likewise, when the fire of hatred spreads to whatever my mind is attached to, I should immediately get rid of it, for fear of my merits being burned. So if you become too attached and obsessive about your relatives, parents, and so forth, then what happens is when someone harms them, it makes you unhappy, and that brings about anger. And so anger arises because you have attachment towards your near and dear ones. So the more attached you are towards them, the greater the anger, the more powerful the anger will be when they are harmed. Verse number 72, why is a person condemned to death for fortunate and not fortunate if they are released after having a hand cut off? Why am I who am experiencing human misery not fortunate if by that I am spared from the agonies of hell? So if someone is sentenced to death, then rather than actually having to face death, if the person is gets a punishment whereby his or her hand is cut off, then that would be worthwhile rather than losing one's life. If I am unable to endure even the mere sufferings of the present, then why do I not restrain myself from being angry, which will be the source of hellish misery? For the sake of satisfying my desires, I have suffered numerous burnings in hell, but by those actions I neither fulfill the purpose of myself nor others. So by showing patience, what this shows is ultimately you gain merit, and in the immediate situation you don't lose your peace of mind. Yet now, since great meaning will accrue from harm, which is not even a fraction of that, I should indeed be solely joyful towards such suffering that dispels the harms of all. Should someone else find joyous happiness in praising my enemy as an excellent person, why mind do you not praise them too, and likewise make yourself happy? So instead of becoming unhappy when your adversaries are praised, So you should not lose your peace of mind when you hear other people praising your adversaries, your rivals. But instead, you should also try to praise them and be happy. That joyous happiness of yours would be a source of joy, not something prohibited, a precept given by the excellent ones. So by praising your enemy, you draw happiness or joy, and that is a cause for a very stable joy and happiness, a precept given by the excellent one, and a supreme means for assembling others. So others will see you being very honest and not jealous about your enemy and angry at them and so forth. So they will appreciate you. It is said that others are made happy through being praised in this way. If in this way you do not want them to have this happiness, so if you become unhappy when you hear your enemies being praised by others, then since it makes them happy, you should cease giving wages and the like to your servants. However, you would be adversely affected both in this and future lives. When people describe my own good qualities, I want others to be happy. But when they describe the good qualities of others, I do not wish to be happy myself. So why are you unhappy when others who want happiness have a very small happiness? Having generated an awakening mind through wishing all beings to be happy, why should I become angry if they find some happiness themselves? So when where is your asking where is your bodhicitta gone? If you are unable to bear the happiness that's someone a small kind of happiness that someone experiences. If I wish for all sentient beings to become Buddhas worshipped throughout the three realms, then why am I tormented when I see them receiving merely mundane respect? So you have to feel happy when others become happy. Verse number 84. If you become jealous and unhappy with the good things that happen to others, then your aspiration or to enlightenment is only in words. What does it matter if my enemy is given something or not? Why? Whether they obtain it or whether it remains in the benefactor's house, is in either case, I shall not get nothing. Verse number 87, even if your enemy is made unhappy, what is there for you to be joyful about? You are merely wishing for them to be hurt, did not cause them to be injured. So when something adverse happens to your enemy, you should not be happy. Your wish cannot be fulfilled, and even if it materialized, it's not good. Verse 89. It is certain that I shall be cooked in cauldrons by the guardians of hell. So next shows avoiding anger at those who harm your near and dear ones to gain praise and fame. Verse number 90, the honor of praise, fame will not turn into merit or life. It will give me neither strength nor freedom from sickness, and will not provide any physical happiness. If I were aware of what held meaning for me, what value would I find in these things? I should devote myself to gambling, drinking, and so forth. The sequence between gambling and drinking in Tibetan, it's easier if drinking is taken first. If for the sake of fame I give away my wealth or get myself killed, what can the mere words of fame do then? Once I have died, to whom will they give pleasure? When the sandcastles collapse, children howl in despair. Likewise, when my praise and reputation decline, my mind becomes like a little child. So when others praise you and you become famous, then you should not become angry at those who try to harm, cause these things not happen to you. Since short-lived sounds are inanimate, they cannot possibly think of praising me. But as it makes the bestower of praise happy, my reputation is a source of pleasure for me. Whether this praise is directed at myself and someone else, how shall I be benefited by joy? Since that joy and happiness is theirs alone, I shall not obtain even a part of it. So you should not be happy when others praise you, and on the other hand, you should not be unhappy when others despise you. Because when you become too happy when others praise you, it increases your pride. So then you become jealous of others, you also become competitive with others. If I do find happiness in their happiness, then surely I should feel the same way towards all. And if this were so, then why am I unhappy when others find pleasure in that which brings them joy? So when you become famous and you gain lots of praise, that in turn can be cause for you to create negative karma. Therefore, praise and so forth distract me and also undermine my disillusion with cycling existence. I start to envy those who have good qualities, and all the very best is destroyed. Therefore, are not those who are closely involved in destroying my praise and the like also involved in protecting me from falling into the unfortunate realms? I, who am striving for freedom, do not need to be bound by material gain and honor. So why should I be angry with those who free me from this bondage? So because others despise you, if you say that that actually causes you to complete your accumulation of merit, then there's nothing greater to accumulate merit than showing patience. If due to my own failings I'm not patient with this enemy, then it is only I who am preventing myself from practicing the course for gaining merit. If without it something does not occur, and if with it it does come to be, then since this enemy would be the cause of patience, how can I say that the enemy prevents it? So the patience which is the result in order to have it, you have to meet with the person who provokes anger. And once you meet with the person provoking anger in you, then you have the opportunity to practice patience. Therefore, how can I say that the enemy prevents it? A beggar is not an obstacle to generosity when I'm giving something away, and I cannot say that those who give ordination are an obstacle to becoming ordained. There are indeed many beggars in this world, but scarce are those who inflict harm. For if I have not injured others, few beings will cause me harm. Therefore, just like treasure appearing in my house without any effort on my part to obtain it, I should be happy to have enemies, for they assist me in my contact of awakening. So the cultivation of for the cultivation of bodhicitta, the main negative force is that of anger, and in order to overcome it, the main counteracting factor is patience. So you cannot practice patience in relation with your gurus, bodhisattvas, or buddhas, and your relatives, but you have to practice patience in connection or relation with someone who actually provokes or brings harm to you. And that is your adversary. And therefore, you have to practice patience. And that enemy or adversary gives you the opportunity to practice patience. And therefore, you have to feel his or her kindness. Their kindness, they are like your teacher for cultivating patience and practically for you. And therefore, you have to regard your enemy as your teacher and by feeling their kindness. Because I am able to practice patience with them, they are worthy of being given the very first fruits of my patience. So that enemy gives you the opportunity to practice patience, and in dependence on that person, you are able to practice patience, and therefore, the very first fruit of my patience in this way, they are the cause of it. So if there is some fruit that you cherish so much, you have to also cherish the cause that much. But why should my enemy be venerated, who has no intention for me to practice patience? So although the enemy becomes your object of practicing patience, but then that enemy doesn't have the intention to give you the opportunity to practice patience. Then why venerate the sacred Dharma? So if the enemy has to be someone who has the intention to help you, then the true cessation doesn't have any intention to bring you any benefit. And the path that brings about the true path that brings about that cessation, both do not have the intention to actually give happiness to you. Then it too has no intention, but is a fit cause for practice. So if the other thing has to have the intention to benefit you, then the true cessation and true path should also have that. So that is true, but surely my enemies are not to be venerated, for they intend to cause me harm. Although Dharma, true cessation and true path do not have the intention to cause me to bring any benefit to me, but they don't have any intention to harm me. If you ask that, if you say that in response, then these two lines are said. So because someone has the intention to harm you, they are considered as your enemy. But the doctors, when they actually go through treatment and amputate your limbs, then you don't become angry with them. Then how could patience be practiced if, like doctors, people always strove to be good, to do good to me? Thus, since patient acceptance is produced in dependence upon one with a very hateful mind, then that person should be worthy of veneration, just like the sacred Dharma, because they are a cause of patience. So the enemies are real enemies, cause for you to practice patience. So this is very powerful reasoning. Therefore, the Mighty One has said that the field of sentient being is similar to the Buddha field. So you have to venerate your enemies because of their kindness to you. For many who have pleased them have thereby reached perfection. So to reach Buddhahood, you rely or depend on both the Buddhas and sentient beings. Buddha's qualities are gained from the sentient beings and the conquerors alike. So why do I not respect them in the same way as I respect the conquerors? So in dependence upon the poor, humble sentient beings, I have the opportunity to accumulate merit quickly, complete the accumulation of merit, and to overcome the afflictions. So you, in relation to the sentient beings, you accumulate merit and try to overcome afflictions, defilements. And therefore, so why do I not respect the sentient beings in the same way as I respect the conquerors? So reaching Buddhahood for yourself, half the causes, of course, they are from the Buddha's side, and half of that is from the sentient beings. So when we talk about receiving blessings, the Tibetan term for blessing is Chinlap. Chin has the meaning of magnificence or something wondrous, and then Lap has the meaning of some kind of a movement like a waves. So the transformation that happens through the blessings or inspiration of the Buddhas within ourselves does that function of actually transforming us. So the main blessing has to come from sentient beings, because we cultivate compassion, special resolve, and bodhicitta in relation to sentient beings. So the Buddhahood qualities of the Buddhahood are gained from the sentient beings and the conquerors alike. So we should not disregard, neglect sentient beings while paying our respect to Buddhas. And then, if both the sentient beings and Buddhas are needed for us to become a Buddha, then are the Buddhas and the sentient beings equal? No. Of course, they are not similar in the quality of their intentions, but only in the fruits that they produce. So we are not saying that the Buddhas and sentient beings are equal in their qualities of their mind. But because we reach our goal, the final fruition of Buddhahood, in dependence on sentient beings and Buddhas, they are equal in that sense. So it is in this respect that they have excellent qualities and are therefore said to be equal. So with compassion we focus on sentient beings, and with wisdom we focus on Buddhahood. So whatever merit comes from venerating one with a loving mind is due to the eminence of sentient beings. And in the same way, the merit of having faith in Buddha is due to the eminence of the Buddha. Therefore, they are asserted to be equal in the share they have in establishing Buddha's qualities. Yet none of them are equal in good qualities with the Buddhas, who are boundless oceans of excellence. Thus, since sentient beings have a share in giving rise to the supreme Buddha qualities, surely it is correct to venerate them as they are similar in merely this respect. Furthermore, what way is there to repeat Buddhas who grant immeasurable benefit and who befriend the world without pretension other than by pleasing sentient beings? As Lama Tsongkhapa praises the Buddha for being excellent, wondrous, and being the unsurpassable object of refuge, or a teacher. Therefore, since benefiting these beings will repay. So for the Buddhas, the only thing that they do is to please sentient beings. So if you help a single sentient being to help them out of problems, then the merit that is gained from that is greater than by venerating Buddhas. Therefore, since benefiting these beings will repay those who give their bodies and enter the deepest hell for their sake, I shall behave impeccably in all that I do, even if they cause me a great deal of harm. So the Buddhas generated bodhicitta for the sake of other sentient beings, and then they engaged in the bodhisattva practices, the great extensive and the profound practices of bodhisattvas for the benefit of sentient beings. And then, because of that, they reach the goal of enlightenment, where they fulfill both the goals of oneself and others. So while we live, we have to live in dependence on other sentient beings, thanks to the kindness of other beings. And then when we develop the path within ourselves, they also are done so in relation to sentient beings. And finally, when you become enlightened, you reach that enlightenment because of the sentient beings. So practice of the 10 virtuous actions, which is avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions, the morality of avoiding 10 non-virtuous actions is done in relation to sentient beings. And then also bodhicitta and other practices are done in relation to sentient beings. So the sentient beings are the source of all our good qualities. Therefore, (122) because of their happiness, the conquerors are delighted. So when sentient beings are made happy, then conquerors are delighted. However, if they are harmed, the conquerors are displeased. And hence, by pleasing them, I shall delight the conquerors, and by harming them, I shall hurt the conquerors. Just as desirable sense objects would give my mind no pleasure if my body was ablaze with fire, likewise, when living creatures are in pain, there is no way for the compassionate ones to be pleased. Therefore, as I have caused harm to living beings, today I openly declare all my unwholesome acts that have brought displeasure to the compassionate ones. Please bear with me, O Lords, for this displeasure I have caused you. 25 also read. So I usually say this, that if you are gather with a good friend and have a good meal, and if you are somebody who doesn't take chili, or if you are somebody who take chili, if the friend is someone who doesn't take chili, but you have invited the person for a meal, rather than considering the friend's diet, if you put lots of chili in your food, then that's really bad way of treating your friend. So you have to be considerate to the other person. If you have invited them as your guest, so on the one hand we pay respect and we have faith in the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. But while having faith and respect for the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, if we disrespect, bully and exploit sentient beings for whom the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have so much love, then that's not good. So we pay respect we have faith in the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, so the more we respect them with faith and devotion, the more we have to be respectful to sentient beings, because that respect in turn comes in dependence on sentient beings as well. There is no doubt that those with the nature of compassion regard all these beings the same as themselves. Furthermore, those who see this Buddha nature as the nature of sentient beings also see the Buddhas themselves. Why then do I not respect sentient beings? Pleasing living beings delights the Tathagatas and perfectly accomplishes my own purpose as well. So the cultivating compassion is towards sentient beings is the best way to make offering to the Buddhas. In addition, it dispels the pain and misery of the universe. Therefore, I should always practice it. So, Kono Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen writes in his praise to Bodhicitta. So all the good things, the excellences in our life throughout samsara and until the highest goal comes from, ultimate and temporary, comes from sentient beings. For example, should some of the king's men cause harm to many people, far-sighted ones would not return the harm, even if they were able to do so. For they see that these men are not alone, but are supported by the might of the king. Likewise, I should not underestimate weak beings who cause me a little harm, for they are supported by the guardians of hell and by all the compassionate ones. So, behaving like the subjects of that fiery king, I should please all sentient beings. Even if such a king were to become angry, could he cause the pain of hell, which is the fruit of I would have to experience by displeasing sentient beings? And even if a king were to be kind, he could not possibly grant me Buddhahood, which is the fruit I would maintain by pleasing sentient beings. Why do I see that my future attainment of Buddhahood as glory, as well as glory, renown, and happiness in this very life all come from pleasing sentient beings? So, having dedicated your body, speech, and mind, and all your merits to sentient beings, if you could actually gather together your efforts, your might to increase your courage to reach Buddhahood. So Kono Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen in his praise to Bodhicitta says, if you wish to be friendly with others, cultivate bodhicitta. If you want temporary happiness, you should meditate happiness, and if you want Buddhahood, meditate on bodhicitta. If you want happiness for yourself, do that. And if you want happiness, fame, glory, and a name, and so forth, and meditate on bodhicitta, he says. So this is like the one medicine for all kinds of sicknesses. While in cycling existence, patience causes beauty, health, and renown. So by practicing patience in relation to other sentient beings, you will have beauty, health. So as it is said in Madhyamaka through patience, you have beautiful figure. And because of these, I shall live for a very long time and win the extensive pleasures of the universal chakra king. So that's the end of 6th chapter. Tomorrow morning, first we'll do generation of bodhicitta through ceremony of bodhicitta, and then taking bodhisattva vows. And after that, Tara Jenang, which comes from a vision of the 5th Dalai Lama. So when we do the ceremony for giving vows and initiations, it's very important for the Lama and the disciples to have a very strong bond. Samaya, to keep Samaya is very important. The teachings that we have done today and yesterday does not demand such a pure bond. So for this precept between the Lama and disciple, you should, as I usually say in India or elsewhere abroad, I talk about Shugden, which actually originated during the 5th Dalai Lama's time. And the 5th Dalai Lama, Shugden was somebody, an evil spirit. He arose through negative prayers, and then his identity, according to the 5th Dalai Lama, is that he harms the Dharma and sentient beings. He is a perfidious or malevolent spirit, and then what he does is harm the Dharma and sentient beings. So he's a fallen spirit, in other words, in morally fallen spirit. And therefore, in order to receive the bodhisattva vows and take the Jenang tomorrow, if there's anybody who actually propitiates Shugden, I ask you not to come tomorrow morning for the ceremonies. There are people who claim Shugden to be Gelugpa Dharma protector, but the Gelugpa protector who were bound by oaths to the Lama Tsongkhapa are Tamjin Choegyal. The 6 armed Mahakala so we'll start at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I have to first do some preparation for the Jenang. And then we'll also meet the Southeast Asian group. We'll meet with His Holiness in the afternoon and have a photo session. Yeba nyambar meba ya kone kondo pewa sho